All right, I'm going to start by just going around and seeing how people are doing in their end of semester crunches right here. We here have 2 weeks to go, and we are, by the seat of our pants, going to get there to the end. Greg, how about you? Where are you at?
Well, we're quarters.
Yeah,
Beck and I are quarters, so we're not.
So you're relaxed right now.
Arguably, yeah. So early in the spring quarter, have yet to give my first tests. So yeah, things are good. Students are happy. I'm happy. Panic and despair have not yet set in.
We'll check in at Memorial Day with you and see how things are going.
Right.
Yeah. Carlos, how about you?
As I'm panicking and copying and pasting documents into things. We go by quarters too.
Really?
I'm on.
I didn't know that at NC State. Okay.
Not NC State in general, just the biotechnology program. We're absolutely weird.
Wow.
And so I'm doing my second 8-week quarter, and the class is online. So right now we're releasing the module for this week, and also planning for summer projects and summer undergrad research experiences. So a little frantic. And I decided to, on top of this, I decided to take a couple of QM courses this entire year because I was, needed something else to do.
I was about to say, because you thought your life needed another challenge.
I needed another one. So my homework is due in like 5 p.m. Yeah.
Jesus. Well, that'll keep you busy. Let's go to Melanie. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. 2 weeks left to go too for our semester. It is a little frantic, and I am teaching summer. So as soon as I'm done, I have 2 weeks, and then I'm starting summer. Summer is all remote, and our college is planning for a full reopening face-to-face, no modifications to the fall schedule. So we're going from completely remote to completely face-to-face come fall. So I'm a little panicked about that too, putting 20 students back in the lab, sitting, within inches of one another. So yeah, that's where I am. Thank you.
It's like nervous trepidation, right? Like we're supposed to be putting an alternative schedule together too, but we don't anticipate actually using it. So it's like we should be back to normal, but it will be like, where will the world be in a couple of months? It will be interesting. And now, Becca, how about you?
Thanks, Michael. I'm Becca Price at the University of Washington, Bothell, she, her, hers for pronouns. And we are in week 4 of a 10-week quarter. We are feeling the fatigue of having been here for 15, 16 months, however long it is now. 14. I can't keep track.
6 months, 9 months, 12 months.
Yeah. I have one class where only half of the students are showing up. We're meeting remotely, but we have synchronous meetings. And since lockdown started, I've been structuring my classes so that students can take it asynchronously if they need. And now it's not that they need to take it asynchronously. They're just not there. So that poses a new challenge. That we're dealing with.
All right. It sounds like we're all ready for this to be over, basically, one way or another. All right. So this paper, I actually didn't notice till I'd already sent this paper out. A couple of years ago, I had been working with a genomics and bioinformatics class here at Hampden Sydney, and through my connections with a couple of people at UGA, I had invited someone to come up and give a talk just about their research and to work with my bioinformatics class. And I hadn't thought about this in a couple of years. And then I look at this paper after I send it out, I'm like, A. Kelly Lane, who is it's her. Like, I was like, oh my God, I know who this is. So I was actually very excited. Now I see she's apparently moved to the University of Minnesota and she's doing pedagogical research, which is very exciting. And so this was that rare, like, oh my God, I know that person moment when I first pulled this paper out. And so A. Kelly Lane comes from the University of Georgia Arundel tree. So this is a strong tree. And the subject of the paper here is, I found a very interesting one. And Becca, to your point about new CBE articles that might need annotation, I thought this was a really interesting one in terms of following all of the coding that they did, and the teacher, what's it called? Instructor Talk, that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot to unpack in this paper. And so if you're looking for education stuff to be annotated, this one's very interesting to me, as you alluded to. And the subject matter basically is something that I think we've all sort of thought of, but maybe not really thought of in terms of what we do. The notion of what to do on the first day of class, how to set the table for a STEM course. In this case, introductory STEM courses, but really we could be talking about any level of course here. What do we do on the first day that sets the tone for our class, that allows our students to maybe feel comfortable, to understand the ground rules? Just how do we approach that? And so what they did here was some pretty extensive recording and coding work at their 3 institutions here. They speak in code, but Minnesota, Cornell, actually there are 5 different here. I knew when they said one school is public and private, I'm like, okay, that's Cornell, because that's the only school I know of that actually strides that we're public and we're private at the same timeline. Looking at introductory level classes, albeit all at large institutions, which is a potential criticism if you want to talk about that, but trying to come up by coding with how different instructors handle that issue of the first day of class. And what you see here in table 1 is just an idea of coding by time, and then coding by the particular type of conversation that's being had by the instructor at each point. And the latter is based off an already existing code, Instructor Talk. What is being done at 1-minute intervals, coding for presence or absence, as you see there, in terms of what the instructor is doing. Is the instructor talking positively? Is the instructor talking negatively? What is the subject matter on which they are talking? Also involved in all this is good old Copus, which those of you that have been with POM for a while know that we love our Copus and that we use that for our own analytical work to see how POM itself is going. And Carlos and I are part of a group, and Greg has been interviewed for this, a paper we're working on to use Copus combined with interviews to understand the efficacy of this very network. So I also called up, just because I think we're going to probably want to look at it a little later, the supplemental material, because I realize there's a lot of detail in there. Sometimes, supplemental materials just, well, literally supplemental, like, okay, just if you want a little more understanding of something, that's great. There's actually a pretty rich amount of information in the supplemental material in terms of like what other means and things like that I would like to show at some point. But we start here with just the idea of how much time is spent on particular materials. And what I enjoyed about this is they basically did something that looks not unlike a bioinformatics problem, where they took a bunch of data and tried to cluster it according to particular responses. And so you get the mapping here, the heat mapping. Not unlike gene expression patterns, we're seeing different levels of STEM content, higher or lower, on the given first day. And so I think that is a good starting point for our conversation, and that is your particular considerations on what you've done on the first day of class, what's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you. And then what we can do is compare that off to what the subjects of this particular paper have done. So let me get someone to start on this.
I maybe can start. So when we were face to face, I've been teaching at my institution. This is my 18th year. And I'm sad to say that I basically just did the same thing every semester because it kind of had that down pat. So I would always, go over the course requirements, but before I got to the course requirements and the syllabus, I always gave an overview of the content and talked about the course first, and then always did the course requirements last. So not really giving content, more just an overview of what to expect in terms of content. And but now that we're remote, I've been making use of first day of class breakout rooms, having students like work on a problem right from day one. That I think I would like to carry back to face-to-face
Oh,
classes.
interesting.
Because I think that, I never tried to do introductions on the very first day. I always waited till like lab when they were in small groups to do introductions. But I thought it might be interesting to use like an opening activity, like putting them into groups maybe right on the first day in order to introduce the material when we go back face to face. So I've been thinking about that, especially after I saw this paper. It's kind of rethinking the first day strategy.
That's very interesting. Like the pandemic has actually influenced, maybe for the positive, like how you treat that first day, or forced you into doing something that actually worked out well, and now you would voluntarily do it, for lack of a better way of putting it. Very cool.
Yeah, along those same lines, I sort of had, so classroom flipping, I think we all know what that is. I was sort of always thinking, well, I should really do that, but never actually got around to it until the pandemic. So now, and then I felt sort of forced to flip my classes. And now that that has happened, I definitely intend to keep things that way. So that for me was a positive impact of COVID upon my teaching.
I can't wait till later in the year when all these journals start to come out with their teaching in the time of COVID issues. They're all going to come in a wave. And originally I thought, well, this will all be over by then. But then at the same time, I think what's going to get really interesting is this legacy of the things that we just keep on doing. It'll be very, very interesting to see. I personally fall on the left side of figure 1B. I'm the higher STEM content coverage. My syllabus should probably be more detailed. I'm not one of those people that goes through and does every case scenario into my syllabus at my own peril, mind you. And so I find that I'm done talking about setting up the course, things like that, and like 15-20 minutes have gone by, and I don't want to dismiss them after 20 minutes. I actually start going into the class. What I try to do with the coverage on my first day is not some, just dive in like willy-nilly, like, okay, chapter 1. Like I try to do like an introduction, like I'm teaching my genetics class right now. So a big broad, like, okay, how do we define this? Why is it interesting? Like, a 30,000 foot view as opposed to just diving in like it's a regular class. So I try to strike a balance here. I think that's why I was attracted to this paper was, I think we're always nervous about, are we doing the quote unquote right thing in this situation? And of course the answer is there's no, solid right answer. I think what's intriguing in this paper is that we are dealing with introductory students, and so maybe there's an added pressure here to not do something that's going to scare people right out of the gate, or something that's going to welcome them into the discipline, more so than an upper level course where you already have them hooked per se, or more excited about something. Good. I'm just I'm looking at the background of the stuff Becca's contributed into the chat. Liquid syllabus, which I'm not familiar with. Would you mind mentioning what that is briefly?
Yeah, if Melanie can help.
Sure. I actually sat in on a webinar, like very early in the pandemic, with the Brokansky, I forget her first name. So that's in the Michelle. That's in the California Community College Consortium. They have a lot of really excellent materials, and they came up with this Humanizing the Curriculum. And part of Humanizing the Curriculum was giving a liquid syllabus, which is something that's more visual, that students can look on their phone, and that they could get that information, you know, several weeks before class started, which again, until the pandemic, I never did that before. It was always day one when I didn't teach online before. But I really liked the liquid syllabus, and I actually had my daughters help me create it because I never created a Google site before. so that was kind of like our pet project this summer, was creating a Google site for liquid syllabus. I can show you mine, but literally I just copied Michelle's her setup, and I just put my information in there. So it looks very similar to hers, but I can share mine if you want.
So does that mean it's sort of like a template? I mean, I'm just curious what it does in the broad.
I think what makes it different is that it's more accessible to students because it's a visual, it's a
I
website.
see. Okay.
It's a Google site. I guess you could use any
Yeah.
platform to create it. But it's a visual. So I put like a video introducing myself.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
I gave them all the information that they need well ahead of when class starts, so that they're kind of up and running. But maybe
you could flip your first day of class then, hypothetically. That you could just dive in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's
But
kind of the purpose.
yeah.
Huh.
But I'll tell you the downsides, Michael and Becca. Maybe you can jump in on this. I don't know how many actually read it.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I don't have, like, I don't know, maybe there's a way that you can put like a views, you know, like how many views you get or who actually looks at it, because I
or
thought
the
I
old
was
trope of like taking a 5-point quiz on the syllabus or something, so you know they did it.
Exactly. I would use that in my orientation module. So I started opening my course like 2 weeks early in my LMS. And I have an orientation module where, you're right, they do have to like complete certain things.
Yeah.
Like a team maker survey to put them into groups and stuff. But I found that even though I did all of this, not everyone was willing to kind of start class early, you know. So I got many students that didn't even like appear until class started. They didn't check their email, or maybe they didn't know how to. The email at our college is really confusing. There's 2 different student emails, and one goes to Canvas, one goes to Outlook. I think it's very confusing. So they may not even have received it, and they may not have even known to look at it or look for it. So I think until it becomes part of a routine, they may not necessarily know how to get that information.
So I feel like the liquid syllabus is kind of next generation graphic syllabus. So years ago, the graphic syllabus was basically, how do you turn your syllabus into a magazine layout that's just more interesting to read. And here is, how do you put your syllabus onto a website? And so the different tabs of the website go to different policies. And then tabs, like where you have a welcome video, is quite current, right? I saw a liquid syllabus, the colleague that introduced this to me, she was referring to current events in her welcoming video. So you know that it's fresh, and there's a certain increase in engagement because of that. And I think that a good liquid syllabus is going to do basically all of the things that are in the vertical axis of these graphs. So maybe not the surveys, but I think a lot of the other things would be there. And as far as how do you get students to read this, one of my favorite activities in a class is to start with a gallery walk.
Oh,
Have different stations in the room, and in the online world, what we do is have Google Slides, so students can go through the slides in their breakout groups. And one of the slides is to look through the syllabus and write down the information that they think is most important and any questions they have. So just like in teaching content, if I really want them to know it, I need to give them class time to work with it, to hold them responsible for that knowing. And so at least they're spending the 5 or 10 minutes in class going through the syllabus and knowing that it's a reference point that they can keep returning to throughout the quarter. It also gives me a written list of their questions about the syllabus, which means that I can give them a written list of answers to their questions. So again, it becomes another reference for the students. You know, Melanie, same thing. I don't know how often students use those notes that we generate in class, but at least they're there. And for the students who haven't taken advantage of the time to look through the syllabus, they become engaged in the course in a fundamentally different way through that class discussion.
I just wanted to quickly put up here so people can see what this looks like from Melanie's class. I'm intrigued. I have to say.
Yeah, I just have to be really
looks really
honest.
nice.
I did a lot of copying and pasting directly from Michelle's site.
It's so
I-
attractive though. Look at this.
Well, I have to say my daughters helped me because I had never created a Google site. But you know, the kids grow up with Google, right? My kids use Google Classroom. They know how to use Google products. And so Michelle had suggested using Google Sites, but I think you could use any platform to host your website, if it's WordPress or whatever you're doing. But and I do want to give my daughters credit because they did help with the graphics and things like that. And it was fun. It was fun. Like, I don't think I'll give this up either, going back face to face. I'll probably keep this too.
So let me ask you, just scanning through this, you have here, and this is something that comes up in the paper, you have here a pretty distinct, like, this is what the structure of the class is going to be. Here's an explanation of the flipped classroom. That's actually an entire separate conversation we can have, right, about how to make flipped classroom work and explaining when you're doing active learning, here's my objective, here's why we're doing this. I'm not trying to not do my job, right? That's the usual criticism we get. And so you do, it looks like a nice job here of explaining, here's how this is going to work. The paper itself then talks about amount of time people spend on that first day of describing these sort of things. So when you send this out to your students, and we're talking about all these different things that you do on the first day, when you actually get to the students on that first day, do you not talk about this at all? Or how much do you take before you actually get to the material?
So again, Michael, I just started using this within, since the pandemic. So,
right.
Just summer, fall, and spring. Those are the only semesters I've used this so far. And I don't come back to the liquid syllabus. I send the liquid syllabus. I also have a printed PDF to make it ADA accessible document for them as well. So I have the liquid syllabus and then, a traditional syllabus. So on the very first day of class, I actually take some of those graphics, like the flipped classroom, and I use that in my welcoming PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah. All right.
So I took some of the graphics and to explain what the course structure is going to look like from the liquid syllabus, but I didn't go back and rehash the syllabus.
It ties back to here is why I asked, right? So you are introducing some of those concepts, but you're just not just reciting the syllabus back, right? You're just showing them the highlights of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
What I believe to be the important pieces, right? For the first day, like, this is what you need to know now. You need to know X, Y, and Z today, because especially summer. I teach summer, we're done in 6 weeks. And I know you guys teach quarters, so you understand. You guys, they need that information that day.
Yeah.
I almost feel like if they don't get it right away, they just fall behind.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's actually really cool that I had not seen something like that before. Just to go on with the paper here itself, you see some representative examples of high STEM content, low STEM content, about how things are done. I have to say, I probably look a lot like instructor 16 here, where like by the time I'm in the second half of the class, I'm talking about stuff again in an introductory way, but like I'm reflecting on myself. I think I look like number 16 relative to some of these other folks here. And if you go into the supplemental data, there's a more defined or a more detailed version of that if you want to see how everybody else is operating as well. So let's talk about Instructor Talk. And this was really interesting in terms of looking at how positive phrasing was used and negative phrasing was used. And I found this interesting because sometimes I think about the way I interact with some of my students. Sometimes, and maybe not on the first day, sometimes you have a joking relationship with a student, and that joking relationship would absolutely be categorized as negative phrasing. But I suppose you don't lead off with this sort of stuff on the first day, so I think that's okay. The idea here of what would be considered positive, what would be considered negative, and you see here again illustrated on heat map. I'm curious to see what instructor 23 was doing with a significant amount of negative phrasing here relative to the others. I will say I try to do, I don't know how well, oh, I thought I could get into more detail. I don't know how well I do. I try to do a fostering wonder thing. That's my jam. Like when I'm talking about molecular and cellular stuff, I definitely try to get into the like, do you guys understand how amazing this is, that it's all conserved and all this work? So I definitely fall into that camp, and I see it's a small camp, but I definitely go there on that first day. Promoting diversity in STEM, it's a very noble thing. Again, I don't know on the first day how much of it one gets done. I'd be curious to see how this would look if you went over the course of a longer period of time. Let me actually, can you guys see the supplemental materials now? Good, okay. So they have a more detailed, so here's the COPUS analysis, which I won't dwell on, but they go in on here. If you really want to dig into the weeds of the high versus the low STEM content coverage, you can do that. This is what I wanted to get at. The different kinds of positive phrasing, and then in 4 here, the different kinds of codes that they developed here as well. So if you look at some of the details here, like what would some of the positive phrasing be, you see some of the examples of how people are talking about building up their students for that first day. And so I found this to be really interesting. So let me ask you guys, when you're looking at your first day of class, what are the particular things that you would highlight? I know for me, I like to highlight the way that they're going to not just take tests, that they're going to have some writing assignments, that they're going to have laboratory poster, that I'm going to give them different ways to express themselves, to show their talent, I'd say, over time. Maybe that's fostering learning for the long term, although that's probably more like thinking beyond the course. Are there particular things on this list, or maybe things that you choose to highlight when you talk to the students in this sort of instructor time with your class?
I kind of like, Michael, how you mentioned the fostering wonder. I teach a cell molecular class, also a genetics.
I feel like a dork when I do it,
Yeah,
but it is.
I know. I mean, I do really stupid stuff. Like I'll tell students, I'll be talking about something that's going on in the cell, and I'm like, can you feel it? And they think like I'm like crazy, but it is pretty amazing to think that, this is going on in all of our cells right now as we speak. That's one of my shticks. But I usually try to pick something either from science or nature, like the breakthroughs of the year, something that is very, very current and very novel and very exciting. And actually, like science or nature will even have like a PowerPoint figure that you can, grab and then use. And, I try to use that in my presentation just because I think it's really important to highlight some of the really, really recent and really exciting research that's going on in those fields.
Mm-hmm. How about you guys, Greg and Carlos?
I also try to do, I don't call it the inspire the sense of wonder, but I also try to get them excited, like, think about the robots, or think about using automation, or think about all the microbes around us. And I either do it with short videos showing how big companies or big discoveries have been made, or I bring in, when we used to do this in person, bring in a journal and show them the cover has next-gen sequencing and microbiome stuff, or bring in a tube or a flow cell. And with that, I get hopefully some more buy-in. And I've been really trying to push this idea of let's co-create together. So we're all a team here, and we're going to learn from each other's experience. And that's hard coming after a liquid syllabus Google Doc that now has a table of contents, and I scrolled down and I'm like, these are the main points. Or I try to talk about food insecurity and housing insecurity. So it's a rough transition.
And you've got here you mentioned building a community among students in that discussion, and that would be another thing that I don't know how well I do it in the first day, but certainly want to get at the idea that there will be collaboration among your students, right? That they will be talking to each other, working with each other. Usually when we have these conversations or these journal clubs, there's always at least one point in the journal club where we talk about, I wish I knew how to effectively assign groups and things like that. Again, there's all other papers on that subject, but the idea of telling the students that they are collaborating, that the students ultimately will work together. That's assuming that's part of your class, of course. When I do some of these classes, I definitely try to do something where I tell them they're going to be talking to each other, and that like we will work on the idea of building comfort, things like that. I'm not a big icebreaker person. Like that always, I have like PTSD from that earlier in my life. So I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore. So I certainly don't do them in my classes. That would be like cycle of violence. But you see here all the different, I just wanted to show you the different specifics that were listed here in the supplemental figures, because I was struck by the amount of detail that was put in here that I thought was really useful. Also here you see the code books for the topics. Carlos and I are currently immersed in, I would say, Carlos, fair to say, both you and me, 4 into this. And so if I'm speaking out of turn, let me know. But like, we have a couple people on our team with the Palm Network that are much more versed in coding than us. So going through interviews and figuring out like what's in common, what details you can refer to here. And then finally, adapting the code book to the original framework. And actually they didn't change all that much at the end of the day. They just simply wanted to associate all these different specific things to their goals. And so they just wanted you guys to see this in more detail. So all of that said, I'll go back to the main paper here. I think that's the last figure. It is. So I think what I want to get at here is then what this paper is. I don't think this paper is trying to make a claim. I don't think this paper is trying to say this is the way to do it. I think this paper is simply trying to illustrate here are the different ways people have approached this. And as always, results may vary, but what is appropriate for your particular class is probably some tailored version of this, right? Like what would be the sweet spot of content versus community building? I suppose there's something to be said, as I'm saying that out loud. I'm sort of like what you were saying, Melanie, with like an activity, a breakout room. Like, is there something to be said on that first day for doing something that would deliberately have the students talk to each other, or maybe just think of a big question and come together and provide those answers? Like show people right off the bat, like that we have this collaboration in the class. I don't know if there's a question in there anywhere, but just it's making me think about that as something that could be useful for a first day.
Yeah, I think for online, like I said, I didn't do this in the past in a face-to-face. I think I would like to do that in the future. I know I tried for my genetics class. Like I'm really not afraid to try stuff, even if it fails miserably. So I just kind of picked different activities. I was teaching 3 different courses this semester. For my genetics course, for the first day activity, I picked the big ideas in genomics by 2030. They were published online. And so I gave them a list of those big ideas, and I had them go into breakout rooms and then list or rank them, by what they think is the most important, or what they think, from a social or ethical perspective, what is the most important big idea by 2030 in genomics. So that was just one idea that I had just kind of off the top of my head. I was trying to pick up different things. For my Bio 2 course, we start with molecular genetics. This is a general biology course. I gave them the card sorting activity for the images. Are you familiar with that? I forget the
a little bit, yeah.
name. Yeah. So that was kind of fun because I gave them the card sorting activity, and then we came back to it at the end of our discussion of molecular genetics. So I just tried to do different things that would be engaging and not so icebreaker, like you said, where like, what's your favorite food or something like that. But I tried to make it like topic specific, so it would be more engaging.
I have some colleagues that I think successfully do the whole introduce yourself, what's your major, what are you interested in. That's not going to work in a bigger class just by volume, and that if depending on your personality, that could be really cool. It's not my personality, but I could see where that could be effective if done right, but not for me. Okay. So this paper is more about, I think, just thinking about this. And I should point out here, in the latter part of this paper here, they're talking about some of the precise quotes that are used, just to give you an example of how, in this particular example, they promoted diversity, or how here, just trying to get people excited about ecology in a sense, or the idea of how biology is not just in the classroom, but it's this universal thing. This actually reminds me, Melanie, of what you were just saying right here about like looking at the future and how things are going in terms of societal choice, maybe. And so the rest of this just talks about these different examples and just providing, I think, a message in that first day. And that may be the summary statement here about what is the message you're trying to convey to your students on the first day? Not just what the content of the class is going to be, but how am I going to approach the class in terms of my expectations, in terms of the conversations you're going to have with each other, etc. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting paper.
Yeah.
I did not read the supplemental information, so that will make me think maybe going back and taking a look at that.
It's funny. Usually I don't look at the material that closely, but like it was in enough times. I'm like, okay, I got to go look at this. And there's actually like really like here, supplement themes within Instructor Talk coded as other. And like it actually gives all these other really specific details about like particular things that they added in here that I think are pretty interesting. I teach at an institution with a fairly strict student honor code. And so I know I have colleagues that would talk more about academic integrity than they probably would at other institutions. Distractions, electronics, that depend professor to professor about like, do you ban electronics? Do you welcome electronics? How you deal with that? So details in here that you can certainly think about. Okay. That's a good stopping point. Thank you guys very much. This is actually, I always come out of these like feeling like I've learned something. So this is very useful for me. And now I get to go teach a lab, which won't be as fun as this. So I appreciate you coming out in a busy time. So thank you guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.